Welcome to PR Powerhouse, helping female entrepreneurs to get in the press and to gain PR. I'm Jo Swan, and I'll be sharing how to harness the power of the media to boost your credibility and business visibility, no matter what stage in business you're at. Because I'm on a mission to show you that PR is not just for the big boys. In the show, you'll learn how to reach out to journalists and own your place in the press, because you are ready to become a PR powerhouse. Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of PR Powerhouse. Today, it's actually Halloween today, so I'm recording this for you on Halloween. So today we are having a topical thread. We are having a topical discussion, and today's episode is all going to be around facing your fears, particularly your visibility fears. So I've had a really interesting week. We've had a couple of days off, and I've been to a theme park with the kids actually. And I love a good theme park. I love that sense of, you know, you're going to be scared. You know that that's kind of what you're there for. I love a good scream. I do a proper shriek. So I do enjoy the kind of release of that. But it was really interesting, actually, seeing how the kids dealt with it, how they kind of faced their fears and how they dealt with that quite differently. And last week, within Chocolate PR, we talked about this same subject actually, and so many of our clients really rose to the occasion by really consciously being more aware of their fears and really consciously actually working with them to really fight them and to sort of come out the other side. So I'm going to share a little bit of their experiences with you and some of their fabulous wins as we talk about facing your visibility fears. Throughout today's episode, I'm going to share a few quotes with you because I always find it sort of sticks in your head a little bit more if we have some kind of key sayings that really resonate with us. So the first thing that I'm going to share with you is a quote from Dale Carnegie. And he said, "Fear doesn't exist anywhere except in the mind." Now, we all know this is true. We've all heard all of the psychological kind of explanations about where fear comes from. We know that it comes from that kind of primal sense of way back when we literally feared for our lives. And our body is kind of set up in that fight or flight mode to enable us to run for the hills when we need to do. But also, we've got to remember that our lives have evolved, and therefore we need to help our minds evolve. And we need to help our minds not kind of be the ones running the show. You know, we need to take charge a little bit because actually they don't really know what's best for us anymore. They can't really identify different levels of threat. So if we have the same physiological response as fear, where actually in our mind, that means that something terrible could happen, but actually all we're scared about is maybe doing a Facebook Live or maybe putting ourselves out in the media where actually we are not going to die. And do you know what? Nothing terrible is going to happen to us. We need to be able to take control of those emotions. So I think it's really interesting to just start this episode with that kind of premise in mind that, you know what, we need to be really mindful of this, that fear is something that is created in our minds and we can control it to a certain degree. So the starting point of this is really the number one point that we're going to deal with today around facing your fears. And when we asked our clients what they were actually scared of, what were the things that they were really frightened of when it came to stepping up and stepping out in terms of standing up for their personal brand, these are some of the things that they told us. The number one fear that came out when we asked our clients was the fear of rejection. Now, this can be a fear of rejection from journalists. It can be a fear of rejection from the audience. It can be a fear of rejection from those around them in their lives. And this is a very real fear that we really create within ourselves. We really build this up to be something quite dramatic and quite horrendous in terms of some of the outcomes that we imagine could happen. So it's really important to recognize that that is something that is stopping us. And this is the thing about facing your fear. It's really important to break down these fears and to get as close to them as possible so that we can really see exactly what it is that you are scared of. So rejection was a big one. Ridicule was a big one. This really comes down to a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-belief, but the feeling that you're maybe putting yourself out as an expert too soon and you don't have enough to say about that subject. It might be the fact that you've been knocked down before, and so you are scared of putting yourself out there because you don't want to be in that situation again. So the fear of ridicule is also a big one. The fear of judgment kind of comes with that. And this is sometimes a bit more around if you are going to share your story rather than just your knowledge. And the fear of judgment of, why is she telling us this? Like, this is her personal life. Why is she on the front page of a newspaper sharing this story? Oh, honestly, what is she doing? This is some of the things that we start to think, and we kind of create these big scenarios in our heads about what will happen when we do these things. And we make these fears really, really big. And we create fear around these ideas of other people's responses to our behavior. That's basically what all of those things are connected to. A fear of rejection, a fear of ridicule, and a fear of judgment. They're actually all fears that we can't really control, because ultimately we can't control the actions of the other people around us. We can't control the reactions of a journalist. We can't control the reactions of our audience or of our nearest and dearest. We can't control how other people respond to us. So why are we going to live our life in fear of something that we can't control? That doesn't sound like a great plan, does it? So getting close to our fears and facing our fears is very much the first step. And this is something that we really, really dig deep with our clients to do. So we run a program called Dare to be Seen. And we are in the early phases of this program. It's a program that I absolutely adore. Where we literally take our clients through the process of being a complete PR novice to being published within 8 weeks. And the process that we take them through is so much more than just about getting in the media. It's so much about really facing their fears about why they're scared to do this. What are the things that are stopping them? And so often it's these three things. It's the fear of rejection, ridicule, and judgment. So in facing these fears, we start to break them down a little bit just by being very specific and being able to identify them and where they come from. So if we've got a fear of rejection, quite often we would know where that came from, or there's a sense of something in our past that has maybe made us feel like that. So what we need to do is identify that situation and isolate it. Recognize that that was an isolated situation, that doesn't mean it's going to repeat itself again. And that's something that, is quite a mindful exercise to do. If you've really built up this big fear around something that you think is going to happen again and again and again, and you've got to be able to break that cycle. You've got to be able to break that fear down and really try and face it head on and say, right, okay, that might have happened once, but it's not happening again. Sometimes these fears don't even come from learned experience. Sometimes they are literally just fears that we sort of manifest in our own heads because of our own self-worth or our own internal struggles. So sometimes there isn't even any evidence at all to even base these fears around. It's completely irrational, but that comes from our imposter syndrome, and that comes from what we're saying to ourselves in our heads. So it's so important to break these fears down, to identify them, to identify exactly what it is that we're scared of, so that we can then face them head on. So my question to you at this point is, what are you scared of? What exactly are you scared of? Which one of those things resonates with you the most? Is it a fear of rejection? Is it a fear of ridicule? Or is it a fear of judgment? Okay, so how do we move on from this? Well, number 2 is around creating a new belief. And this is where it starts to be really fun, because this is where you can start to really make a change in how you think about things and how you believe in yourself and how you trust yourself. So creating a new belief is all around taking that thing that you're scared of and actually proving that that is not the case. So what we've got to do when we're trying to face our fears is we've got to kind of fight back with a bit of evidence that that is not the case. We need to really give ourselves and our minds some practical ways to fight these fears. So one of the things that we like to encourage our clients to do is, if they've got a very specific fear, to take that fear on and to test it. And I know that sounds a bit crazy when you think, oh my God, but I'm terrified. Why would I put myself in that situation? Because you've got to be able to move forward. So you've got to take that fear and you've got to find a way to test it. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to create a positive example, a positive influence that can basically reject that fear. So I'm going to hit you with another quote at this point. And this one comes from Nelson Mandela. And this quote goes, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." And I'm going to follow that up with another one from Sammy Davis Jr., who says, you always have two choices, your commitment versus your fear. So we know that if you're listening to this podcast, that you are in some way committed to being out there. You are some way committed to getting visible. You are committed to sharing your story, to spreading your message, to sharing your knowledge, to make a bigger impact, because that's why you're listening, right? That's why you're here. As a female entrepreneur who is passionate and purpose-led, who's on an absolute mission, and you need to find more ways to raise your profile. You need to find more ways to engage with people to get that message out there. So I know that you are here and you are ready and you are prepared to start making a commitment to challenge the fears that might be stopping you. But it does make sense to just tackle them and to talk about them rather than try and sweep them under the carpet. So how do we create a new belief? Well, we've got to do something different, haven't we? We've got to do something to prove that that belief is not true. So what we need to do is we need to create a positive situation that reinforces the fact that nothing awful is going to happen when we do this thing. So what we encourage our clients to do is to take action. And this is really important. And I like that quote from Sammy Davis Jr., which is all around your commitment versus your fear. You've got to take action. And something else, another quote from Dale Carnegie, actually, which I'm going to just pop in now. He says, if you want to conquer fear, don't sit home and think about it. Go out and get busy. And that is absolutely what we encourage our clients to do. Go out and get busy. Go out and take some action. So if you are worried about being ridiculed as an expert, the only way to overcome that fear is to literally try it, to put some content out there and to see what response you get. And it is very unlikely that you are going to get ridiculed for sharing something that is of use and of substance to others. So really think carefully about your audience. Really think about who could really value what you've got to say. Who can you help? Be very specific about the content that you put out to those people. And make it the best content you've ever written. Make it the most engaging content. Make it the content that you really, really care about. Really think about how this could help them and their business, and give your heart and soul to that piece of content. Write that piece of content and find a really easy platform to put it out. So you could just put it out on social media. You could just put it out through a LinkedIn blog, or you could find a really nice, easy way in through like an online site where you could just get published effectively as a blog article. So something like Thrive Global. Put that content out there and see what response you get. It's very unlikely that you are going to be ridiculed for sharing something that is of value to other people. When you put that content out and you get a positive response, you get a positive reinforcement that actually this is wanted, this is valued, this is something that people are lapping up and actually thanking you for, then you are going to start to scrub out that belief that when you put something out there, you're going to be ridiculed. You're going to start to scrub out that belief that you're not a big enough expert, because these people are valuing your information, they're valuing your knowledge. You're going to start to scrub out this idea that actually no one listens, no one cares what you have to say, because people are going to be really responding and asking you for more. So you're creating something that is very positive on the back of a very negative belief. So what I'd recommend you do there, if you dare to go a little bit further than just posting it on your social pages, I would encourage you to have a look at something like Thrive Global, which is an online site. It's a fabulous, fabulous site which covers all sorts of content, from health and well-being to productivity to much more business-focused content to health to relationships. It's vast, and it was set up by Arianna Huffington from Huffington Post. So it's very, very credible. But don't let that scare you. It's not a scary platform, because actually it's a platform where you are able to contribute. So they welcome contributions. They actively encourage contributions. You don't have to pitch it to an individual. You can literally pitch it through an online form. So go and have a little explore around that. And if you are worried about putting yourself out there as an expert, if that's one of your fears, please go and have a go at drafting some content there. Get it published, share it on your socials, and just prove to yourself that actually people want this stuff. People need this stuff, and people appreciate you sharing your knowledge. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is taking a level of fear away when it comes to fear of journalists, because this was another big fear that came up. So I've just explained to you how you can actually potentially get some PR without even speaking to a journalist if you explore online sites, things like Thrive Global, where you can self-publish. But if you want to make a bigger impact and you want to really get into the flow of PR, you are going to have to communicate with journalists as well. So this is one of the really big things that scares people about PR, about public relations, about getting themselves in the media. The fact that you have to communicate with journalists who people see as scary. And I think there's something in this in terms of how the media present journalists and, how they're presented on this TV. And there's this kind of sort of persona of them, isn't there? That they are actually a little bit abrupt and mean and frightening. And, they've kind of live in this ivory tower. And that isn't really how it is in the real world. I mean, some of the kind of old school journalists like to live by that a little bit. But ultimately, there's so many journalists that you can connect with that you are always going to have access to people who don't stand up to that persona, who don't live in that kind of world. So what we want you to do when you're thinking about this fear of being scared of putting yourself out to a journalist is to break that fear down again and realize that journalists are just people. So I've talked about this in previous episodes, the fact that we need to get human to human when we're talking to journalists. We need to really think about them as individuals. So the next step of kind of getting rid of your visibility fears is stop putting journalists on a pedestal and start treating them as human beings. So there's a few ways that we can do this. And I always feel that the more familiar you are with somebody, the more easy it is to actually communicate with them. So my first tip would absolutely be go and get familiar with the journalists who you think are going to be the key ones for your subject. And this is something, again, you're scared of journalists because you're scared of the unknown. And often we kind of have this big idea of, I want to be in Forbes magazine. I want to be in Red magazine. I want to be on the BBC. And that feels big. And that size of that is one of the things that can create the fear because it just feels too massive. It feels like it's not doable. So we need to make it much more doable and much more accessible. So rather than thinking, I want to be in Red magazine, think about exactly where you would fit within Red magazine and why that is an absolute no-brainer. Convince yourself that that is just what needs to happen, that it's completely natural for you to be within that particular section, within that magazine, because you've read it a million times and your content fits perfectly. So first of all, you start with that. You start with believing that there's a space for you and that it becomes so natural and so obvious that it is a no-brainer. Next, you then have to think about, right, well, how am I going to get myself into that publication? And it's not going to be through pitching to the editor of the publication. It's very rarely going to be that you pitch to the editor of a magazine of how you're going to get in that publication. So have a look at who writes for certain sections. Have a look at who the exact journalist is who is responsible for that section. Go and find them. Now, the best place to find journalists is either on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or on Twitter. Twitter, I would say, is your starting point because they are all pretty much active on Twitter because they use it as a tool. They use it as a tool to actually source content. And they love it because it's quick and it's fast and it's kind of, there's no messing around on it because you don't have enough characters to mess around. So Twitter is a really great place to hang out with journalists. It's a great place to build connections and relationships with journalists. So go and find the journalists that you need to befriend and do exactly that, befriend them. Don't pitch to them straight away. Don't start sending them stuff when you're not 100% confident. Just start to get to know them. And journalists are quite chatty on Twitter. So you can find out quite a lot about them. You can find out what they're interested in. They often share what they're watching on telly. They share what events they've been to. They share what they've been up to. So just get in a flow of conversation with them. And that is absolutely the first place to start. Because when you start to become friendly with them, I'm not saying that you're automatically going to become their best mate, but when you become friendly with them, it takes that fear away again of it being something so big and so scary because they're just another person, that is just another contact, another connection that you're chatting with online. So get into that flow of feeling like you're connecting with them. Really get to regularly be in communication with them and not always pitching. So that's something that you can do. You can break down the fear of pitching to a journalist by actually starting to talk to an individual instead. And often on Instagram, they do share a bit more of their personal lives as well. So again, I'm not telling you to go over to Instagram and start pitching to them, But if they're over on Instagram talking about how much they love their dog, then find something that you've got in common. Find a way to connect with them. And it really is just the same as building any other relationship. You've got to start with the human side first. The fifth point I want to talk to you about in terms of facing visibility fears is around giving yourself a head start. And this can help with something called newsjacking. Now, I'm going to talk to you about newsjacking more in the next episode, but I just want to touch upon it today because newsjacking is a way that you can give yourself a head start. And how this helps with your visibility fears is because when you're newsjacking, you're jumping on something that is already of interest to the media and to society, basically. It basically means something that is already being discussed in the news. So if it's something that's already of interest, then you're not going to look quite so much of an idiot in your mind. I'm not saying that. You're saying that to yourself. You're not going to look so much like an idiot in actually having a voice on this because it's something that people want to know about anyway. It's something that they're talking about right now. And actually, your opinion on this thing could be really helpful. Your opinion on this thing could bring in a new dimension. Your opinion on this thing could really bring this topic to life. And in fact, if you're prepared to share your story on this subject, then that's hugely valuable because that can make massive impact. That can really, really hit home and really bring a subject to life when someone is prepared to share a personal experience. So sometimes all we need to do to face our visibility fears and to battle them is to give ourselves a little bit of a head start. And if you are going to go down the road of newsjacking, that's exactly what you're doing. You are giving yourself a head start. Because if you can relate your subject area to something that is already being discussed and of interest, then you already kind of jump over lots and lots of the hurdles in terms of your fear of being rejected, your fear of being ridiculed, your fear of judgment, because you're wading into a wider conversation and it feels like actually you've leapfrogged a few steps. So I'm a massive fan of this, and it doesn't always work in your business. It's something that is a very timely thing that might only work a few times a year in your business. But when it's there, it's absolute gold. So I want to share an experience with you now of one of our clients who is in our Dare to Be Seen program at the moment. And this is a fabulous lady called Hannah. And Hannah joined Dare to Be Seen absolutely terrified of sharing her story. Absolutely overwhelmed by the thought of how she was going to do this, how she was going to really connect to her story and be brave enough to communicate it in a way that she felt comfortable with. She was worried about how other people would perceive her. She was worried about journalists rejecting her. She was worried about getting it all kind of right in terms of presenting it properly and being able to communicate it strongly enough. And she was worried about standing up and kind of owning this story, which is not surprising when you know what the story is. So Hannah's story is one of trauma. It stems from an experience from her youth when she was spiked, where her drink was spiked. And as a result of that, she suffered sexual abuse. Now, this kind of stuff is actually more common than we would like to think. And a number of our clients create businesses from a place where they have come from trauma because they want to make a difference to people. They genuinely want to make a difference to others who have been in that situation and who are not feeling strong at the moment, to make them believe that they can come out the other side. And this is the thing, all of our clients have come out the other side. So even though Hannah was nervous about putting her story out there, she's done so much work on herself that she is confident that she has come out the other side, and she's now coaching other people to help them basically move forward in life and to stop trauma trapping them, which is an incredible, incredible coaching business that she's got. So this opportunity came up for Hannah. She's joined Dare to Be Seen, and one of the first things that we do with clients in Dare to Be Seen is we start to build up a media bio. And in that bio, we ask you to pull in all of your personal story as well as your business story, because it's about connecting the two things together. And it's about making sense of why you do what you do. So Hannah always knew that that was going to be a process that she was going to go through. But there was parts of her story that she had never even spoken to me about when we were chatting about whether she was right to come on this program. And then this thing happens in the news, all over the news. There's been loads and loads of media around spiking. It's just something that has come out as something that has been in the press over this past week, super, super topical content. And it's been discussed everywhere. But Hannah is based in Ireland, and it was particularly something that has come to the forefront in Ireland. Now, Hannah sat with this and she realized that this was something that she needed to speak out about because this was very much a part of her story. And she knew that she could bring to life some of these statistics, which was showing that this was an increase in trend. And she knew that she could put a human slant to this story and really get people to understand what it means for someone on the receiving end of this. So Hannah put her hand up and said, right, I want to do something about this. I am ready. I want to get my story out there and I want to get involved in these conversations. Now, she was only a couple of weeks into our program. So in lots of ways, she wasn't ready. She didn't have her story completely crafted. She didn't have everything, all of the ducks lined up, but she led from the heart. She led from her truth and from her passion. And so we supported her in terms of helping her find the right ways to get across the right parts of her story that were going to help illustrate this message. And she was so brave. She connected her story back to her business. She openly talked about her experience. She took the line of, do you know what? This has happened to me and I need to use this now for good because I've come out the other side. I realize that I can move forward from this trauma. Not everybody does. So this is my opportunity to really stand up and to really show people that you can come out the other side of trauma. And for me to put a human face to these statistics that are being splattered about in the news. So she was really connected to this, that she needed to do it. So she was facing her fear. She was still terrified of being rejected. She was still terrified of how her story was going to go down. She was still terrified of actually what her friends and family were going to say. It was only a few weeks ago she changed her name on Facebook to her actual real name because she'd been kind of hiding so much. And, this was a really, really big deal for her. But she chose commitment over fear. She chose to take action. She chose to not sit at home and think about it. She chose to go out and get busy. She chose to conquer this fear. And oh my God, the reaction has been immense. So she got a full double page spread in an Irish newspaper publication. She was on the front page of it. She's been on TV. She's been on radio. She's got more newspaper coverage coming up. And it's because she is basically bringing to life a subject that it's so human. And the only way that really gets brought to life is through people being prepared to share their stories. We can talk about statistics till we go blue in the face, but it doesn't mean anything until you actually hear someone's story. And that's how things get changed. That's how people commit to doing things to make this situation better. They hear people's stories and think, well, that is not acceptable. And also people who are perhaps in that situation right now have heard Hannah's story and have realized that, okay, I am not the problem here. I'm the victim, but I don't need to be a victim for the rest of my life. And there's so many positive messages that are coming out of how Hannah is empowering people with this story that has helped her face her fears. So literally, within 2 weeks of not daring to even share her own real name on Facebook to now being on the front cover of a newspaper sharing her story, Hannah has massively faced her visibility fears. But the reason that she could do it was she kind of had this leapfrog of this opportunity of newsjacking. If she'd had to sort of take her own time to get that story out there, I think it would have taken significantly longer. We would have got there because she's supported in our program. We would have absolutely got there with her by the end of the 8 weeks. But I think it would have been much closer to that 8-week point than it is to the 2-week point where she has now got loads of national press already because she was able to be sort of projected forward through this opportunity of newsjacking because it just connected to her so closely and she saw it as an opportunity that she couldn't waste. So if you have got fears, sometimes actually just jumping in and going for it is the best thing that you can do. Planning it and taking ages and ages to really perfect it can also just fuel that fear sometimes. So look out for opportunities, look out for newsjacking opportunities, see what's out there. It's quite often that when you start to follow the thread of your content, when you start to follow the theme that you might particularly want to talk about, a subject area, or a content theme, when you start to really get intentional about following those themes, you will always find opportunities. There are always opportunities for you to share your voice on something that has already been talked about. And that does leapfrog you, that does catapult you, and it does give you a head start. So if you are feeling scared and you really want to think about how you can move forward, how you can face your visibility fears, then think about, could you give yourself a leg up? Is there a leg up to be had in terms of what's already out there being talked about? Because it absolutely 100% worked for Hannah. I'm going to get Hannah on in a future episode to actually talk to you about her experience, because I think it's so interesting how quickly she managed to turn that around. But yeah, it absolutely helped with the urgency that there was a very now situation that she 100% had to make use of. So as we move out of Halloween and we move into only the last couple of months of the year, which is crazy, how are you feeling? Are you feeling ready to face your visibility fears? And if you're not, what can you do? What action do you need to take to get you moved forward, to get you progressing, to get you really, really committing to fight your fear? What can you do? Where do you need to start? You need to start by facing those fears. I would then suggest you need to start by breaking down those fears and creating new beliefs that actually kind of poo-poo those fears. They start to just reject them, and they start to fight against them, and they start to really break them down in terms of their credibility. You want to sort of break these fears so that they're not these big ones that are holding things over you, that actually they don't have any power. I'd then love you to think about what action you could take. What action can you take to give yourself some positive reinforcement and to create new beliefs? So to create a belief that you are a valued expert, that your story does matter. Do that in a small way. Do it in a safe way. Do it in a safe environment, but just do something to take that step to get yourself out there and to dip your toe in the water a little bit and to realize that no one's going to die. Nothing bad is going to happen. And actually, you're probably going to get much more positive response than you do negative. The next thing is, if you're scared of journalists, we are going to have to deal with journalists if we want to do public relations properly, if we want to do PR properly, if we want to get ourselves in the media. So think about how we can strip back our fear of journalists, how we can be more human to human with journalists, and how we can take our fear away from them. And the last thing, have a think about what opportunities you have to give yourself a head start, because there always are opportunities out there. You've just got to look for them. So I really, really hope that by you having a listen to this episode today and being inspired by Hannah's story, you can start to face your visibility fears, because you've got something worth saying, you have got a story worth sharing, and you've absolutely got expertise that can help other people. So it's time you start to do it. It's time you start to dare to be seen. It's time you start to get yourself and your message out there and become a PR powerhouse. If you'd like a safe space to come and explore this a bit further, to come and hang out with other people who are in this exact same situation, who are also dealing with visibility fears, please come and join us over in PR You Can Do It, our free Facebook group, because when you are together with other people in this situation, that's when the power comes and that's when the fear can start to go away. So I'd love to have you there. Thank you for listening to PR Powerhouse with me, Jo Swan. If you want to feel empowered and supported and excited about getting in the press, come and join us in our free community over on Facebook at PR You Can Do It. I would absolutely love to see you there so I can help you take those next steps to getting in the media.